Mr. Combs, I'm so glad you got your seat of honor over here in the middle of all the action, all right? We've been telling tall tales about you.
Oh, have you?
Right. So we're going to see if any of them are true. Okay. We've even got a little microphone and a little camera here. So if we could get you to kind of sit down here, we'll kind of lock you in.
Okay.
There we go. All right. All right. Now the cameras, they're buzzing on you. We were interested to see if we couldn't get a piece of Arvin history walk into the classroom here.
Okay.
There we go. Mr. Combs just told me he had lunch with my mother. My mother's 67. So to Mr. Combs, who's 19, will be 91. Your next birthday?
Yeah, next birthday.
January 20th. And, of course, we have Mr. Combs today, and we're going to invite you back again, Mr. Combs, on the 20th of January for another birthday party right here.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Last year we had a little cake and punch and cookies and goodies. Anyway, as I started to say before, I was telling Mr. Combs about that. My mother's 67, so she's kind of a young whippersnapper to Mr. Combs here, and is still getting around quite well. What we have, Mr. Combs, this is a freshman geography class, and we have begun our study of Arvin and Lamont, and we started with Arvin. And so in the discussion, we talked about one of the early pioneers who happened to be a young man at age 23 named Edgar Combs.
That's the...
And he came to Arvin about, I think it's November the 17th, 1917.
7th, November the 7th, 1917.
Well, then we're going to correct our date.
The last week was 9.
Okay. Now, this is the real history. Now, see, Mr. Hallam had, it was the 17th, so we're going to correct those dates to November the 7th, 1917. And came from Morton, Washington?
That's right.
Okay. And I guess maybe that's where the story of at least Arvin begins. And so the students have a lot of questions that they want to ask you. Maybe I'll just warm up the videotape by asking and then get out of the way here as to what brought you to a little tiny place they even referred to in the beginning as the colony, sort of windswept and sagebrush and, just rabbits and everything like that, and a young man, 23, coming down to California to make his fortune. Why did you come to Arvin?
Well, when I left Morton, I was heading for Los Angeles. And so I got down in Portland, Oregon. I wanted to ride the boat down to Los Angeles. And so I went into the place you get your ticket, and I asked them when the boat left. They didn't even know when the boat would leave. Said, you got to watch the papers and see it'll be in the papers. And so I went out and I run on to a cousin there and some other young people, and they were going up to Hood River to work in the apples. I thought, well, I'll just go along with them and I'll watch the papers, and then I'll come down to get on the boat. So we went up there to the work in the apples, and was boarding in a private boarding house. And one evening, there's only one other fellow and myself left there. The others had went to a party. So I told him I was coming to Los Angeles. Said, oh, why do you want to go to Los Angeles for? He said, everybody goes there in the winter and there's no work for anyone. I said, why don't you go to Bakersfield? More work there. So I just changed my mind and come to Bakersfield. So I worked there till I see in the paper that the boat was going to leave on Thursday evening. So I got on the train and come down to Portland. Got on the boat. That night, about 8 o'clock is when I got on. And as I went out of the mouth of Columbia River about noon the next day, that boat was standing on one end, and then on the other end, the water was rough there at the mouth of the river. So it wasn't long till we was all sick. So I had a ticket. My ticket was called for the lower berth, and I couldn't stand it down there. I could smell the food that we'd eaten the night before. So I got up in the purser's room, and they allowed me to stay there from Friday till Sunday afternoon. We got into Portland, Oregon, and so they put us down in the lower berth when we got close to the point of we was going. And I was there a couple of days, and I ran on to another fellow before I left up there in Oregon, and I told him I was coming to Bakersfield. Oh, what in the world do you want to go to Bakersfield for? There's nothing there but a desert. Well, I told him I'd never seen a desert, so I thought I would come on and take a look at one. So I didn't have much money when I landed in Bakersfield, and I looked for a job right away because I didn't want to be out begging for food. So right away I got a job with a man that's baling hay up here where Otto Yossi did live. And so this man by the name of Tanner there had his car is bringing the man out. Well, he owned the hay, and it had a contract fellow building or baling it. So on the way out, I told him I was from Washington. He said, "You're not close to that little town you call Morton." I said, "I'm right from Morton." So he told me of a family that's here in Arvin with the name of Hurd. Did I know them there? I said I knew who they were, but I wasn't acquainted with them when they was there. So when I got through baling hay, Tanner told me that he'd have me another job. So I went to work for his brother-in-law, Mr. Rich, and then lived right in the house with him. I had a good place to stay that winter. Wages was $40 a month and board. So next spring, this man Rich and me, we went in partners to put in cotton. That was the first year they planted cotton in Arvin. That was the spring of 18. So then, of course, I ran onto this Hurd family here. That is who he spoke of. Had been living in Morton before I come down here. So Mr. Hurd was working out here at Arvin, but his family lived in Bakersfield. But right away they moved back to Arvin, and the family did. And among them was a young lady, and I got acquainted with. She happened to be our Sunday school teacher. So then I took her home on the 24th day of May, and the 26th day of July we was married. So I decided I was going to stay here at Arvin.
Mr. Combs, is that the Miss Farrell Hurd?
It's Mrs. Farrell Hurd, Miss Farrell Hurd, yeah.
Now, as a young man in Arvin in 19 and 18, what sort of dates could you go on with a young lady, or how did you court back in those days?
Well, we went out to the reservoirs and went in swimming of the evening. That was about the only entertainment they had. And there's one reservoir we went in pretty often. It used to stand where the Hungry Umbry is down here on the corner.
There was a reservoir right there?
Yeah, reservoir there, where that liquor store is, and the Hungry Umbry, isn't it? So I remember going in there a lot of times. And then there's one over to the Neff place. We went there once in a while, and they had Sunday school and church. Church hadn't been going, well, his organized in 14. His Sunday school was organized in 13. It happened to be the day that my wife landed and her folks landed here. And Sunday in 1913, and that afternoon she went with her cousin over to schoolhouse, and the schoolhouse was just being finished. They hadn't picked up the blocks laying around, short pieces of lumber yet. My wife said they still laid around there. So they made her secretary of the Sunday school. And the next year then, she was here when they organized the church. But she didn't join. She belonged to a church in Morton and thought much of those young people up there, and she didn't want to take her name out of it, and she thought maybe they might go back someday.
Sounds good. Now, what we might do is some of you may be far away, so if you'd like, I'll back up, whatever. If you want to come sit on the floor, the rug's just a rug. So if there's some of you way in the back can't see, you can come on up. We did last year, sit around Mr. Combs here close. Then we'll take some questions from you. So come on up if you want to come on up. Sit in a little closer, and then we'll take some of your questions. So come on up and sit in close if you want to, and just sit down anywhere. Some of you are far away. You can come on up and sit down, or sit in these chairs here. You can come on and sit in these chairs. Come on up. You guys can sit in those chairs. You can sit there.
Hi.
I appreciate the great history here.
Okay, now what we'll do is we'll take a question from each side of the room and kind of move to one side to the center and then to the other side, and I'll kind of take the question just in case Mr. Combs doesn't hear it exactly correctly. But of course, we told you that sometimes you kind of hear what you want to, and sometimes you don't, and you kind of be smart like a fox. So, okay, this side over here, I want to take one question. Brian?
What was the first main store?
Okay. Mr. Combs, did you hear his question?
No, I didn't.
He asked, what was the first main store, big store in Arvin when you first came here? Did they have any stores here?
A small store, and I understood it had been in operation about 2 weeks when I come. It started around the 1st of November, last of October.
What kind of store was that?
Just a little grocery store. You could almost put them all the stock in a pickup. They didn't have much stock them days.
Was that Mr. Staples?
That's Mr. Staples, yeah.
Down towards close to the railroad tracks is now?
Just this side of the railroad track, and on the north side, the first little building there. No, there's a building there that a service station built just east of it, but it's...
Right there where the old quality market used to be.
Yeah, that's right, the place
Bill
right
Owens'
there.
used car right there on the corner.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Okay, Heather?
How was it during the Depression?
Mr. Combs, what was life and economics like here in Arvin and Lamont during the Depression from 29, say, until 40 or 41?
Well, my wife and me, we had 5 children when the Depression come on. We lived over east of Arvin here alongside the tire line. And we had bought 10 acres there about 3 years before the Depression come. But we owed more than it is worth, I think, if you go to sell it. But we went through that Depression and didn't know any different. And after we got through it, my wife and me were talking one day, and neither one of us had never known any other kind of life until then than that. Because we was raised up in poor country, and we had plenty to eat, but that's about all we had. So we never sat down to the table in the Depression. We had more food than they could eat with the 5 children. And I don't know anything else to tell you about the Depression. There were some families that had to have attention. They had some welfare that they could get some food. But everybody seemed to get along pretty good. Never heard much complaint.
Mr. Combs, what was, at that Depression time, I had to go out just for a second, what was your, say sometimes the people from the Midwest when they moved in here to work, was there sort of a typical family style or appearance that they had when they came in from the East looking for work here in Arvin and Lamont?
Well, there was a lot of them come in, and Los Angeles police had a station over here on the highway somewhere that turned them back if they could do it. Wouldn't let them go into Los Angeles, or didn't want them to go in. They couldn't have kept them from going in if they'd wanted to go. But I don't know how much luck they had in turning people back, but they didn't seem to want them to come in. They had so many on the wanted list, they didn't want any more of them.
Yeah, some of them, they came in and it was kind of hard. There weren't too many jobs, so a lot of people weren't too happy to see them come in if they were going to take people's jobs away.
Well, yes, and they didn't want them on the welfare. They had too big a welfare rolls.
Okay, another question on the far right. Okay, Chris
Where
Combs.
was the main part of town? The center of town?
Okay, when you first came in 1917 or early 20s, where was the main part of town? Where was it located?
Well, it's right down around, all there was is that little store, and there's 2 dwellings there, and a 2-room schoolhouse. And a little pump there that furnished them water.
Question back on the far side over here. Anybody on the far side have a question? Russell?
What did Arvin look like when you first came?
Arvin?
Yeah, what did Arvin look like when
Well,
he first drove in?
It's easy to see it. There was nothing else around to hide it. So, and everyone was more or less excited by having the little store. And they had a post office in 14. My wife's mother got up the post office and got it started in 14. And before that, they had to go to Weed Patch Corner there, where the Weed Patch store is. That corner, the mail carrier come and left the mail there in a box. They'd have to drive a horse and buggy over there and get the mail.
Okay, next, let's see, somewhere in the center section here, or Jesus.
Did you raise your own crops or food?
Oh, how did you get your own food? Did you have to raise some of your own crops or gardens for food, or did you buy
Well, we didn't really go too much on the garden. I think we bought most of our food. And we'd raise some wheat on this desert land. Just with the rain, it'd be a very small yield, but then the money always come in handy there in the summer when you harvest that wheat. And then we'd have in some Kaffir corn, you called it. We grew that by irrigation. And of course, 18, then we started growing the cotton. So that wasn't really a money-making deal. It cost us more to raise it than we was getting out of it. So we quit that kind, and about 22, they got this, I can't think of the name of it right now, the cotton that they're growing here now. Oh, I've known it so long and then I forget it right now. But that's, cotton was started in 22 here. Since then they've made money on it.
Okay, there's a shy one back over here, Mr. Combs. He wants to know if there was, Leo was asking, was there any paved roads at all? Were they all dirt and mud and rock?
They had, the road had been oiled out here. It didn't call it pavement, but they oiled the sand and mixed it up, and there's broken holes in it, and it's really worse than if it was no pavement at all. But in 23, we got the paved highway in here, same year that the railroad come in here, 1923.
Okay, in the center section, Judy. Go ahead.
Did the population grow really fast?
Did the population in Arvin grow very fast?
Well, not too fast, but people kept coming, more of them all the time, and they began to mount up to quite a few people here than the first 4 or 5 years that I was here.
Which grew fastest in the beginning, Arvin or Lamont?
Well, Lamont hadn't started yet. Lamont didn't start till, that was, I forget just what year that did, but it didn't start for a few years after Arvin did.
Okay, Susan?
Was your town, Morton, was it bigger than Arvin when you left?
How's that?
Was it bigger, the town where you used to live in Washington?
Oh, no, it's small. There's only 1,400 there now. I go back up there once in a while. That's all the population they have. Now, Arvin, they have about 7,000, I think, now.
Okay, Dora?
When you first got here, Arvin was known as the colony. When did it first become known as Arvin? When did its name change?
1914, when the post office was out, they got a petition. My wife's mother went around and got the signers on the petition for a post office. And when she sent that in, she had to send 3 names for a post office. Some of them wanted to call it Orange, some wanted to call it Walnut because there's growing walnuts and oranges, or they thought they would be. And so she had to put the 3rd name, and so she just put Arvin Richardson's first name, Arvin. And when it got back to Washington, D.C., they found that they had an Orange, California already and a Walnut, California already, so they had to take Arvin. That's how Arvin got his name. And Mr. Richardson, he lived here in Arvin until 1919. He moved over to what we call Magundon. You know, the Weed Patch Highway runs into the Edison Highway in that part of the country.
Okay. Chuck, wait, I have a question over here.
How many people were here when you first moved here?
Mr. Combs, approximately how many people were here when you first came? How many families or people?
Well, there wasn't, all over the whole country, there wasn't more than 20 families, I'd say. That's really a guess at it, but I could think it over and count them up, but somewhere around 20 families that come into Arvin for the headquarters.
Let's see. Heather?
When you settled in Arvin, did you ever travel back to Bakersfield? And how long did it take?
Well, by car, it took about an hour when you come here because the road was rough from here to Weed Patch. Then you got on to paved road at Weed Patch Corner. But it's around an hour for make it from here to Bakersfield.
There was a question over here, Mr. Combs, that Chris just wanted to know if you happened to have served or been called to World War I, or because you was a married man, a farmer, you didn't have to go.
Well, now, when I got married, I expected to be called any time. I was under the draft, and so I went in before I got married and tried to enlist, but I was under the draft, and they wouldn't. Had passed a rule that they wouldn't take any in the enlistment that was subject to the draft. So I just come back home and went to work. I had a crappie in then, and I thought maybe I'd better get rid of it or something, but went on. They never did call me, and so they had Armistice Day then, November the 11th. So then I felt pretty good after that. But we had a little money when we got married, very little, but I put some in the bank, so if I was called up to the Fort Lewis, why, my wife could go up there to Tacoma or somewhere and stay while I was there.
Now, I'm surprised somebody hasn't asked this question, Mr. Combs. So we certainly want to ask this before you get away. Maybe we'll get the question. Somebody's probably sitting on it, but a question about Edmondson Acres out there. Reports are that you helped develop that and even helped name the streets out there.
Yeah, that's right. We had a friend. She happened to be with my wife the first evening when I took her home on May the 24th. Ruth Tucker is her name then. She married Russell Edmondson, and Russell had that land over there, and they farmed it for a few years, and Russell got sick and passed away, and so Mrs. Edmondson come to us one day, my wife and me, and wanted to know what I thought about her selling that place. She was offered $500 an acre, I believe, for it. And I told her, I said, why not sell me half of it and we'll subdivide it. So she studied about a few days and come back and said, well, I'd rather do that as to sell it. So I went ahead and subdivided it, and that was, we finished it up in about 49 or 50.
And how are the names of the streets?
Oh, the streets, I was called on to name them by the surveyor, so I named the north one there Russell. That was Mr. Edmondson's first name. He'd already passed away, and then I named that center one down there that run east and west Ruth. That was Mrs. Edmondson's first name, and she had a daughter Barbara, and I named that one Barbara. And this Far East Street, Mrs. Edmondson had another daughter, but her name was something that we didn't want. Anyhow, didn't want to name the street that, and she had a young daughter by the name of Judith, so we called it Judith. That's how they got their names.
Jason.
When did they start using cars?
When did they really start using cars here in the Arvin?
Well, there's a few people had cars. Mr. Tanner had a car. Most of our family had a car. And there's a few families that didn't have cars, but most of them had cars, Fords. In 1916, you could buy a new Ford for $425. Because my folks had bought one in the state of Washington for that fall before I come down here, fall of 16. And I know Mr. Haven here, he had chickens on his land that kind of helped him make a living. And he bought a Ford in 16 for about, the same thing, $400 and some. And in 1920, cars went up. He sold that car for $800. The one he'd been driving it ever since 1916.
Claudia? Who, in your estimation, would you say it was actually perhaps the founder of Arvin, or was there more than one founder?
Well, it was Mr. Neff, not any relative of these Neffs that have lived here in Arvin, but he is from San Bernardino, and he bought section 26. Oh, he had 3/4 of it, and he subdivided that and sold it off to people around San Bernardino, most all the people that had lived in San Bernardino before they bought their hair.
Was that Mr. Haven and Mr. Haven?
Yeah, Mr. Haven, Mr. Tucker, and Mr. Tanner, and Mr. Richardson, and there's some more names I forgot. Mr. Warnley he wasn't from San Bernardino, but he bought here in the early days. And there's a Mr. Roderick. He come here from Colorado. Drove, well, I believe his son drove the wagon and team from Colorado down here. And Mr. and Mrs. Roderick, they were elderly, and they come on the train.
I have a question, Rosalinda.
In what year did you have your first mayor?
First mayor, 1920. No, I mean 1960.
Who was it?
Elmer Smotherman. Yeah, Elmer's first mayor.
Come to think of it, I guess there's only been four with Bill Owens, hasn't it? I think it's just been 4. Is that right, John? I think about 4. There's Elmer Smotherman, Frank Gibson, John Sams, and then now Bill Owens.
Well, there's one in there between, he was a crop duster here, and I forget his name, but he lived here on campus, I remember, and I can't recall his name, but his was in there after Smotherman. He was the second mayor. He passed away then, not long after that.
Goes to show you, Mr. Combs has a lot better memory than I do. I'm 41, and he's 90, almost 91. He remembers. I've lived here all my life, too. And I can't remember. I hope I can remember like he can. Let's see. Chris.
How big was Bakersfield when you first came?
What was Bakersfield like, and how large was it? Sort of.
I understood it was about 15,000 when I come here.
So it wasn't real large either.
No.
Mike, Ray Paula, back.
Did they have TV back there in the library?
No, that's way back. But did they have? They didn't have TV, but did they have any kind of radio, or when did radio finally come in?
Well, the radios, I think, and I don't know for sure whether they had them right when I first come here or not. First radio we had is in 28, I remember. But there's other people that had them before that.
Okay. Anybody that hasn't asked a question yet? Okay, Steve?
What were some ideas of entertainment on the weekend?
What were some ideas of entertainment on the weekend, perhaps other than swimming in the reservoir?
Well, most everybody went to church and Sunday school here. It was around, oh, some of them didn't go, but most of them, that's it for the schoolhouse. They had Sunday school in the schoolhouse and church too. Church started in 14.
So it seems like entertainment mainly was what was there, and so
Yeah.
picnics and meeting with people and surrounded the local community of center of social activity would be the religious activity. So social and religious activity were really intertwined in the early days.
That's right.
Susan?
What were your children's names?
Names of your children. Were they all girls or some boys?
My children?
Uh-huh.
We raised 3 boys and 3 girls. But we lost one little boy. It would have been the 4th boy when he was 11 months old. So Hewlett was our oldest son, and Murtis was the oldest daughter, and June was next. Then the twins was born, Wesley and Leslie, in 1929. Then, let's see, no, the little boy that we lost was next after the twins, and then Sharon, she lives in Bakersfield. She was born in 1940.
Okay. Anybody? Okay, Adriana. Do you like how Arvin has developed into a city? Do you like how it looks now?
Oh, yeah, I've liked Arvin all the time. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I like it. I've always patronized Arvin. If we lived closest to a small store on here, we bought all our groceries at that store. And we never was anyone to try to run to Bakersfield to get anything a little bit cheaper. Never did think it paid.
Mr. Combs, how about, well, Darla's got a question. Better ask you that. And then I want to ask you about your radiator experience of running off to Edison. And then somebody said that you went to get milk, and on the way back, your radiator overheated, and you had to pour milk in the radiator.
Yeah, that was right.
Now, how did that happen?
Well, there just wasn't any water along the road then to Edison, and we got down as far as about where the Georgia is there, and so we poured that milk in to get on Arvin.
Darla had a question. Darla, good.
Do you regret not